Welcome back to the Donkey Vote Political Podcast for another interview. And today we have the pleasure of being joined by Luke Gosling, member for Solomon. Yeah, Solomon. Luke, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks very much, fellas. It's great to join you.
Yeah. Just for our audience out there who may not know entirely a lot about you, are you able just to give us a little brief description of yourself before we start the interview?
Yeah, thanks. So I represent Darwin and Palmerston, so the capital of Northern Australia, in the federal parliament. I have been in this position since the 2016 election and just love it. Got a young family here. My wife Kate and I have got a beautiful daughter and son and little Labradoodle, Millie. But I'm originally, like you fellas, from Victoria. Grew up in Yarra Glen, had a career in the military, and then worked in a variety of roles after the military. Now I find myself in politics, which I really see as an extension of the national service, that I gave when I was in the military. So going down to Canberra to fight for the Northern Territory and to fight for the north of Australia is what I love doing.
Yep, and there's not many NT representatives. I think there's only 4 in total. So it's very important that you're out there fighting for the people of Darwin, especially. Having a good representative like yourself, Luke, is always important for those sort of people in that area.
Yeah, and I'm really proud that I'm the only person who's held Solomon for 3 terms. I'm in my 3rd term now. And I have also, got some really big plans for Darwin itself, but also the territory, and have great relationships with my federal colleagues, from the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and the Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles from Geelong, who works in defence, to all around the country. So we've got a great team. We've got a big, ambitious agenda. But one thing about our government, the federal government, is that there's a lot of appreciation of not only the opportunities here in the north, but our challenges as well.
Yeah. We might as well get straight into our questions for you, Luke. So my first question to you is, how was your high school and university life, and do you have any memorable moments?
I went to a few high schools. We grew up in Yarra Glen in the Yarra Valley. So started at Mount Lauderdale College, which was Catholic co-ed school. Loved it. Mum and Dad at some point decided that we'd move into the city. And because we're from a big family, 8 kids, they wanted all their kids to have some great opportunities. So I went to Marsland College for a small period of time. Nothing against the Marist schools, but I preferred co-ed. So I finished up at Marsland College after about 6 months and went to Baldwin High School. Excellent high school, got a great education there. Sort of was, a solid B, 75% type of student, but succeeded
Nothing
in getting...
spectacular.
Not the top, not the bottom, but succeeded in getting a scholarship to the Australian Defence Force Academy. I'd been wanting to join the Army and serve as an officer. So after HSC or VCE, which I really enjoyed, I love school, I went to the Defence Academy in Canberra and did a Bachelor of Arts degree in Southeast Asian History and Politics. But that was high school for me. It was, keeping active, good mates, and I'd like to think above average high school grades, but I certainly am in awe of the young people who get sort of 99% ATARs and that these days. I wasn't sort of up at that level, but I think high school is a balance. Not every kid's going to go to Monash or Melbourne to study law or medicine. I think these days trades are great options for young people, as well as sort of that second tier universities, such as the one we've got here in Darwin, the Charles Darwin University. They're not the old sandstone universities, but they give a great education for young people here in the north.
Yep, and I think that's crucial, as you said, because not everyone is gonna get high scores. There's a reason why there's a bracket of people who get 99 plus ATARs and people who get 60s or 70 ATARs. And I think in general it's important that we have different opportunities for different sort of people. And as you said, up north in Charles Darwin University, it's not a top tier Melbourne University of Sydney, Monash University. But it does its purpose and it serves the people of Darwin very well. And you don't have to go to these extraordinarily strong academically universities to be successful in life.
Yeah, 100%. And that's what I've found is that particularly in the military, it was, obviously there's engineers and they did a lot of contact hours every week as part of their degree. The scientists, they did less, but still pretty consistent. In the arts degree that I did was in stuff that I was really interested in, and that's our region, the Indo-Pacific, and its history and its politics. And for example, it still helped me just this last week past where I was asked to go to Indonesia and to observe the Indonesian elections on behalf of the Australian government. The fact that I learnt as part of my arts degree how to speak some Indonesian, I've built on that over the years, and it allowed me to speak in Indonesian to a variety of people, from Indonesian ministers through to the people on the street, about how they're feeling about that election. And it's really enriched my life being able to speak another language, and I encourage all young people to study another language. So I'll just say one more thing about my high school experiences. Between year 11 and 12, I'd saved up money doing a paper round, and I went overseas to go trekking in the Himalayas, and that was an incredible experience. I saved for it, paid for it myself, really enjoyed it. It was the first time, that I'd been overseas, and I really enjoyed that experience. And in a way, I think it probably de-stressed me and gave me a bit of an overseas experience prior to doing year 12. And yeah, I just encourage young people to travel, to see a bit of the world, to learn some other languages, and it enriches your life experience 100%.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. And how was actually that experience going to Indonesia and working with the Australian government for their elections? Did you learn a lot of things there, being there for the last couple of weeks or so? And how was that experience? If you could give us a little brief talk about how the experience was in general, that'd be great for the podcast.
Yeah, just briefly, it was a short stint, but it was preceded by being with Penny Wong in Perth for the Indian Ocean Conference. So if you can imagine countries being represented there in Perth from the Indian, what they call the rim countries of the Indian Ocean. And obviously Indonesia's and Australia are important ones of those. And that included joining the Foreign Minister Penny Wong for a bilateral with Timor-Leste, a country which I became very involved with both in the military and after the military. So that was a great experience, and went from there, from Perth up to Bali, and obviously a lot of Australians are familiar with Bali, but it was so impressive to see, again, many countries coming together as part of the observer mission to visit polling booths, to visit counting stations. Now, for Australians and your podcast viewers to get an understanding of how incredible this election was, it was the biggest ever single-day vote essentially in history. You had over 200 million Indonesian voters casting their democratic votes, from the president right down to their local area, 5 different ballot sheets, 5 different ballot boxes at 800,000 polling stations. Absolutely incredible. And it's a credit to the Indonesian KPU, their version of the Australian Electoral Commission that had 8 million employees to pull off that one-day vote. So I'm glad for all of them in a way that it was able to get a result on the first count. It looks that way. Of course, all the checks will have to be done, but an incredible achievement by our neighbours in Indonesia. And in fact, when we won government in May 2022, the first visit our Prime Minister did overseas was to Jakarta to meet with the Indonesian President, Jokowi, and our Prime Minister took me with him on that visit. And again, that opportunity started way back when I learned Indonesian first in the military and then kept up with it afterwards. It will always provide dividends in life to learn languages. But my time in the military, if you wanted me to quickly talk about that, is from the academy, I graduated from there to the Royal Military College, which is where just the Army cadets go, and we spent an additional year there. I wanted to be in the infantry, so I went into the infantry, and in particular to the parachute battalion, the 3rd Battalion, which was stationed in Holsworthy. After the parachute course and some advanced infantry training in Singleton at the infantry centre, I essentially went straight away to Malaysia, to Rifle Company Butterworth, where I trained, jungle training, all sorts of training with my infantry platoon of 30 men for 4 months. And that was a great experience for essentially still a young bloke, not long out of school, and you're sort of responsible for 30 Australian soldiers. A big responsibility. And from there, I had a career with various postings around Australia. When I was in Perth, I did some more Indonesian training. I tried out for the Special Forces, for commandos, and that was, and I was successful in getting my Green Beret to serve with the Commando Regiment, which I did in Sydney, including helping to secure the Sydney Olympics in 2000, which was, again, a great experience. I don't regret a day I spent in the Defence Force. I always encourage young people who are interested to join the Australian Defence Force, whether it be in the Navy, the Air Force or the Army, or indeed Border Force. It gives you great experiences, and it gave me a great foundation in life, an ethos, a feeling of purpose, and also a chance to do my duty for our nation. And I think that young people should definitely look at that as an opportunity. Of course, young people can serve our country in a variety of ways to make our economy stronger through what they do in business, or through something like politics, or in the community, whether it be volunteering or in another way. But I'm a big believer in that sort of service. And it stood me in good stead for the things that I did after the military.
Yep, and speaking of your military career, that's leading on now to our second question. So, George.
Yeah, Luke, you had a long-standing career in the Army service before entering Parliament, spending over 13 years in the Army, which includes leadership roles in parachute infantry and the commandos. Are you able to talk to us about your experiences in the Defence Forces?
Yeah, I served with the parachute battalion, and survived every jump out of a plane. Every time you jump out of a plane and you land safely, but you do pick up some injuries along the way doing that type of work, again with the commandos. And then when I served in Timor-Leste, I mean, that was some of the big highlights of my time in the military. It was a particular privilege to work with the Timorese Defence Force. I was an advisor to one of their infantry battalions and worked with an amazing colonel who was a battalion commander. His name was Luke Gosling, a lieutenant colonel in the Timorese military. I think I was advising him, but I think I learnt more from him than he learnt from me, that's for sure. He had served up in the hills of Timor fighting for their freedom over a few decades, or many decades. And that was a great experience, and it led to more commitment from me to Timor, seeing how much development was still needed so that they could, truly enjoy and have their families enjoy a higher standard of living. And that led to me starting a charity in the future. But as far as my time in the military goes, soldiering with infantry soldiers, parachute infantry service, some work that I did, developing young leaders through adventurous training. They were all great experiences. And what you experience is a mateship with your friends that will last the rest of your life. And I'm still in contact with my mates from the military today that I met when I was 18 years old. They're still my best mates. And that's something that anyone who goes into the military will find. I do a lot of work with our veterans community, and it's because I know what sort of a debt of honour we have as a nation to those that have served our nation.
And do you have any specific memorable moments from your military career that you'd like to share for the podcast?
Well, yeah, those experiences in Malaysia as a young officer, and it's always when you've given so much responsibility, some good times and some difficult challenges, but you work through all that as a team. Very difficult selection processes with the military, with the Special Forces military selection. But Special Forces is always going to be difficult to get into, and I really enjoyed and was very proud to, as I said, get that green beret that the commandos proudly wear, and to do the boat training. Some of that boat training was in Port Phillip Bay during winter, so as you can imagine, that's pretty memorable, pretty cold. But really outstanding people in the Special Forces group. Really enjoyed that part of my service. Again, really enjoyed working in Timor-Leste with them, and I encourage any young person who's thinking about working in the Defence Forces to absolutely do that.
Yeah, and I think that also is a bit of an issue as well with a lot of young people. Many of them aren't really as interested in joining the Defence Forces as previous generations. So I think it is important that many young people do join the Defence Forces and are, driven to serve the country. It's not always for everyone, but I think more young people especially, there's a lot of great things you can take out of it: the camaraderie, the mateship, and building relationships and learning skills that are very, very important for you down the line, even in other career paths and other walks.
It isn't for the service in the Defence Force isn't for everyone, that's right. But there are many ways to serve your country, and I mentioned a few earlier, but in terms of, whether it be Border Force or whether it be joining the Australian Signals Directorate, ASD, these are people who are fighting a war on Australia's behalf every day, and that's the cyber war. So defending us against cyber attacks that are ongoing, and that is as important as well. So even for young people who are more technically minded, not only in the Defence Force are jobs incredibly and increasingly technically focused, but it's also true that we need a variety of people working across our defence and intelligence organisations to keep Australia safe. And I always recommend people who've got an interest to look into it and to perhaps consider that. In the interest of time, I might do some of the service that I did after the military, because we still need to get to politics. So maybe, George, if you want to lead into the next question.
Yeah. So, George, would you like to talk about the next question that we have?
After leaving the army, you worked for many NGOs overseas in countries such as Afghanistan, Cambodia, and Timor-Leste. You then went out on founding your own NGO called Life, Love and Health. What made you set up your own NGO, and specifically did your NGO focus on?
I went across to Timor, let's say the first time, to make a film about Australia's involvement in Timor-Leste from World War II through to Interfet and the peacekeeping operations in the early 2000s. We got that film on Channel 9. It's called A Debt of Honour. A Debt of Honour. Plug that into YouTube. You'll be able to watch that for free. It's only a 45-minute documentary.
Yeah, for our listeners out there, watch A Debt of Honor. Luke is featured in it, so it must be good.
Well, I produced the film. It was a labour of love. There's not much money in making documentary films, but certainly my old unit, the 3rd Battalion, was part of the film. But it was also about the World War II commandos, because they really inspired me as a young man to want to go into commandos and the special forces, those Timor commandos from World War II. So yeah, check it out on YouTube, A Debt of Honour. So I saw there, while serving in Timor, whilst making the film, that there was a lot of development that needed to occur. Timor was going to need some assistance for a long period of time to get back up on their feet and to thrive. So I started a small charity with a friend of mine from high school. It was called Life, Love and Health. And we ran for about 15 years, providing volunteer service. None of us ever took a wage from the charity. We fundraised and then we built schools. We fundraised, then we put irrigation programs to get water from springs in the mountains, natural springs, to villages, so that young Timorese kids didn't have to spend their whole morning or sometimes walking 10 kilometres just to get water for their families. So using gravity-fed systems, putting in irrigation systems, building new classrooms and toilets, importantly, for kids in remote areas of Timor, and importantly, maternal health work. We work with a Timorese NGO called the Alola Foundation to do some maternal health education, because so many mothers and so many babies were dying in childbirth. And we believe that, you know, those projects really made a big difference, and we are really appreciative of the support that mainly the Melbourne community, but communities in Darwin, Sydney and elsewhere assisted us with those fundraising efforts. What it also did is gave me an opportunity to study a different language. So I speak some Tetum, the Timorese language, only really conversational level. But then after leaving the army, travelled overseas and worked for an NGO in Albania, helping to build the capacity of their disaster agencies, like the fire service. That was for an NGO. I did some volunteer work in Cambodia for a conservation NGO, and that was to help them to secure a national park in Cambodia, where there was only about 30 tigers left in the world. So these were great experiences. I also did some work in Afghanistan, helping with the security of an election process. Now, that election process, I was working in Kandahar, which is in southern Afghanistan. It was dangerous work, but it was important work in that it enabled the elders throughout southern Afghanistan, which was my area, to be selected by the people to represent the interests of the people in that region, and to go up to Kabul to finish writing the constitution, and that set the groundwork for parliamentary elections into the future. I went back at a later point to monitor another election in Afghanistan in 2014, and there'd been significant progress in that time. But obviously, in the end, the Taliban was able to retake control of Afghanistan. And we all hope that the living standards of people don't go backwards there. Obviously, there was still a period of 20 years where a whole generation of young women were able to get an education, where there was some infrastructure built. And I think that the overwhelming majority of those that served in Afghanistan can be absolutely proud of their service and what we were able to achieve there to help that country. So there's some of the roles that I did after leaving the military, but really when I started, when I came home, I guess, to the Northern Territory, and did some more work in Timor-Leste, including for the President Jose Ramos Horta, Aussie advisor to his chief of staff, around 2007, 2008, helping him with some peace building projects. That was really important work, and Jose Ramos Horta is the president again now of Timor-Leste, and he has done a remarkable job with the current Prime Minister Xanana Gusmao. So I've remained in contact with that country, Timor-Leste, and indeed with Indonesia. But here in Australia, and here in Darwin in particular, I rejoined the army for a period to serve with Norforce, which is the Northwest Mobile Force. Essentially, it's about half Indigenous soldiers up here in Darwin. And I served with them so that I could work with them out in Arnhem Land, which is an incredible part of the Northern Territory, incredible part of Australia. That was a great privilege, and that was the last time I wore uniform. Great thing about the military is you can be a reservist and remain on the books, but then when the army asked me to come back into uniform to work with those Aboriginal soldiers out in Arnhem Land here in the Northern Territory, I jumped at it and had an incredible experience out there with them. Learned a little bit of the language again, making a massive difference to how I could engage with community out there. Also, it sort of led to me getting involved, that service with Norforce in the Army led to me getting involved with the Remote Area Health Corps, and I established that here in the top end. Now, this is an organisation that gets doctors, nurses and allied health professionals out to the community health centres in the Northern Territory, and I established that in the years after leaving the military.
Yep, and from what you've been telling us there, you know a lot of languages, Luke. So I think that's very important, as you did say before, to learn a lot of languages and get in depth with a lot of cultures. And that sort of work, as you were talking about, especially with Indigenous communities around the military, is really, really important because, they are very marginalized within our society. And it's important for us to, support them in any way possible, whether that be finding employment or giving them the sort of skills and sort of, skills and knowledge that they need to help their families into the future.
Yeah, 100%. We've made some announcements recently on how we can improve employment opportunities for First Nations, Aboriginal Territorians, and I'm very proud of the work that we're doing in that space, doubling the amount of rangers, because one thing that Indigenous people here in the Northern Territory and across Australia, they care for country and they want to safeguard country, and working as a ranger, particularly with this, the ability to be earning income for managing fire risks, which is the speech that I gave this morning here in Darwin. That's very exciting stuff. And also managing our flora and fauna and getting rid of feral species and that sort of stuff is really important work. But there's also a range of other jobs in our communities, from health workers to teachers to early childhood workers to aged care workers. All of those workers are needed in the communities of the Northern Territory. The Northern Territory has some main communities that people would be aware of, like Alice Springs, Tennant Creek, Katherine, Darwin, and out to Nullarbor in Arnhem Land. But it's 100 remote communities that also need services. They're part of Australia, and that's sort of part of our job in the federal government, working with the NT government, working with Aboriginal people on the ground to improve livelihoods and to close the gap in life expectancy, which is about 13 years or so. So our work in that way continues on, and some of my big heroes, political heroes, are people actually that had that sort of life experience where they served in the military, but then took that experience into political life. And I'm talking about people like Gough Whitlam, who was up here in the north as a pilot in the Air Force. Also, Tom Uren, who was a famous Labor politician from Sydney. Tom was a prisoner of war in the Second World War, and he had a big role in building regional Australia, places like Albury and Wodonga. Those regional centres were because of Tom's great work. And our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, he actually worked for Tom Uren back in the day. Now, these are great people, but there's also obviously there's been great people like and great prime ministers. The prime ministers that I worked with as first a staff member and then as a PM, I've learned from them all, and really just love our political movement in the Labor Party, and people that stay in touch with the grassroots, have some real world life experience, and can take that into a leadership setting. That's what I'm really impressed by. Just really enjoying the conversation. Probably got about 10 more minutes, 5 to 10 more minutes if you've got any final questions.
Yeah, and I think I was also going to say as well, with our meeting time, we only have about 4 more minutes on this meeting. I don't know if it's possible if you're able to join back on the meeting, because it's like a time that goes down from 40 minutes. So, but I do realize, as you said, Luke, that you've got another meeting up in about 15 minutes or so. So,
I'll be out in a few minutes. So just give me some quick questions.
Yeah, we'll get on now to probably our next question. So, who would you say is your political role model or idol?
Yep, you'll be able to cut a bit of the stuff I just gave to you about golf.
All good.
Into that. Keep going. Next question.
Okay. What made you run in the 2016 federal election for the Labor Party, and what made you join the Labor Party?
I joined the Labor Party 20 years ago, and I believe in social justice, one, but also believe that the Labor Party actually cares about people out in the community, not just, as they say, the top end of town. And you've seen that with our recent tax cuts, to make sure that every Australian taxpayer got a tax cut and it was more fairly distributed. That's why I'm Labor. I ran in 2013 and just missed out. Ran in the 2013 election and did not win, but dusted myself off, come back, worked as a staffer, learned the ropes, won in 2016, 2019, 2022, and really look forward to the next election next year to keep serving the people of the North.
And yeah, we'll move on probably to our last question for you, Luke. George?
Finally, what's one piece of advice you'd give to students in 2024, especially those who are entering university or high school?
Yeah, to those entering high school, to those entering university, there's a saying in the Army, and particularly in the Special Forces community, and that is get after it. Get after it. So don't wait. Talk to people, get mentors, find out, educate yourself about what you want to do, what you want to achieve, and then get after it. Like, do the things that you need to do to achieve that, and don't doubt yourself. You might fail like I did in 2013, but if you get after it, maintain your passion and persistence for what you want to achieve, you will achieve it. But get the mentors along the way, and you will achieve your goals. You'll learn a lot along the way, and then you'll be able to mentor the next generation of people coming through and pay it forward.
Yeah. So yeah, those are all our questions for you, Luke. I do realize you are pretty scrambled for time. As a sitting MP, there's a lot of stuff that you guys have to do, and especially as the member for Darwin, you've got a lot of events and that sort of thing. So we do really appreciate you coming to sit with us, and sit virtually actually, and talk to us about your previous career and your career in the Army, and some advice you'd give to students who are starting university and high school this year. So me and George are very appreciative, and I think all our viewers are very appreciative of your stories and of your advice.
Thanks very much. I really appreciated the opportunity to chat with you guys on the Donkey Vote podcast. And the last thing I'll say is, do not donkey vote.
Always vote. Always research your candidates and vote properly.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Luke. Thank you.